Hi everyone, good afternoon. I'm Pulkit Joshi, Head of Marketing at HROne, the simplest HR software for the most complex operations. I welcome you all to today's masterclass on the topic HR branding and employee value proposition. Our trainer for today's session is Mr. Aravind Warrier. Mr. Warrier is a seasoned HR business leader with 18 plus years of experience in the HR function. A change catalyst, he excels in driving HR initiatives, fostering cultural alignment, and achieving organizational goals. With strong interpersonal skills, Mr. Warrior is a results driven professional who effectively engages at all levels, contributing to the success of organizations' strategic objectives. Mr. Warrior also sits on the advisory board for many leading business schools across India, and he is currently serving as the lead people and culture at Volvo India. Without further ado, I would like to call upon Mr. Arvind Warrior to deliver today's masterclass session. Sir, the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much, HROne, Pulkit, and the entire team for this great opportunity. And I feel humbled and honored to be part of this great platform where I can just share some of my key learnings about the topic. I think this is something which I always feel something which is really growing up, irrespective of any kind of profession you take it up. The best thing the whole session is all about is called the employment value proposition. You can call it employee value proposition, or maybe even you can call it as an employer proposition. So to make things clear, what I'm planning to discuss, or the whole focus areas around the employment value proposition or employer value proposition. Let me start why I'm taking this, because that is the key start. Employment value proposition or the employer value proposition is basically about when you join an organization, what is that I'm extending to you? What are the few aspects or the attributes which the company has to offer or fulfill your set of expectations? That is the key. Basically, I've heard a lot of people saying about the employer value propositions and all. But the most important key element here is when I join your organization, what is there for me? That gets answered from this whole thing. And I think a lot of investment, a lot of thought in terms of your effort, time, and energy has to be this one. And whatever I'm discussing today is just a plain thing. I always feel this is something which I'm addressing all my HR leaders in this session, and I would request all my HR leaders to just think, because there's something which we as an HR brand should also apply it. What is the value proposition that we deliver to our key stakeholders called employees when they join or when they come to interact with us? And the next level of excellence when you do that is something called the experience value proposition, which is not part of the whole session, but then I would request all my leaders to at least take a note of it. Because when you do something called a value proposition, when you deliver something beyond the so-called, beyond the need or beyond the set of expectations, you're driving excellence. You're driving something called the experience. And the world is moving towards that. And that's one reason, I had put this experience value proposition, which is a thought point for all my HR leaders in this session. Because most of us, if you look at EVP, the word called EVP, it is restricted around employer value proposition or an employee value proposition or maybe employment, but not beyond that. And I would request all my leaders, at least today, when you're looking from the branding perspective, let it be any kind of this one. I would request all of you to just today at least look into yourself also. Most of the times we do this from the organization, but then if you can just change the scope or change the lenses, it is also something. Why should someone come to you, or why should someone feel that, okay, I'll go to X person, not to the Y person? What is the extra attributes? What are the extra traits which you do in terms of your thoughts, in terms of your words and in action, which deliver high level of excellence or experience to the other person? And please, let's make it very clear. It's all about delivering excellence, delivering experience, because we are living in the economy of experience, not anything else. Because you look at the social media, people say that I went to this particular hotel, I went to this particular theater, I went to this particular exhibition, I went to this particular store, I went to meet this particular person, I have joined this organization. And they're proud to say that, because the so-called entity or the brand or anything is delivering excellence and experience. And that's why we are taking up this session today. Most important, what and why of EVP, because that's a starting point. EVP, I'm sure most of my HR leaders in this session would know it, but just in recap, most important point, if you can just see the slide, the important thing is the value which someone gains from the so-called employment relationship. I've not put it like that, but I want everyone to think, what is the value if I happen to join your organization? What is that I'm going to get? Is it something really excelling me to the next level of excellence? Is it making me grow? Is it giving me more than something called the reward or the salary? Is it really giving me some kind of intellectual stimulation to think big? Is it giving me a lot of challenging? And believe me, my dear leaders, we are talking to the population, the so-called millennials and Generation Z, which I'll definitely come, which is part of your so-called employment workforce, which constitutes almost now 70% of the so-called workforce also. So this point of time, reconstituting or re-engineering or recrafting the word called EVP really matters. And I would request all my leaders to see this. What is that I can give? And believe me, this is just something very simple. And I would request all my leaders to just, and at the end of the whole session, we are also trying to say how do you craft it also. But then this is pure common sense, and it is something which I would request all my leaders to at least keep a note of it. It's quite simple also. Please understand the value add which someone gets when you're joining an organization is called the employment value proposition. And most important thing, in this age, this really matters, and this EVP, if it is rightly considered, that becomes your competitive advantage. That becomes your competitive tool to outshine your so-called competitors, and that's why we should be investing a lot in this area. Simple terms, it is a set of attributes that people perceive as the value they gain in terms of the employment or in terms of the employment relationship which they have when they join an organization. And that's why crafting, recrafting, reimaging, all those kind of words are very important when it comes to employer value proposition or employment value proposition. What as an organization am I going to deliver so that the so-called perceived value is taken to the next level of excellence? If they don't see that excellence and experience factor, my dear leaders, they're not going to join your organizations. Even you put so much of things. I've seen a lot of organizations saying that, okay, there has been the so-called first day experience was fantastic, but immediately next day, it was quite dwindling. It has come down. Please understand, employment value proposition is not that onboarding day one experience. It's beyond that. Can I really change someone's career? Can I really give him or her an experience in terms of long-term relationship, in terms of the career he or she is holding with my organization? These kind of thoughts are something which we would like to have, which has been planned in this session. So I would request everyone to at least see things from those 5 points which I've written down, which I'm sure everyone can see. It's deeper connections, flexibility, the autonomy which I have in an organization, the flexibility I have. Most important, the purpose. Why should I join an organization? Is it giving me some kind of challenges? And believe me, my dear leaders, the so-called Generation Z, millennials, they're only looking, it's not about the brand alone. Earlier days, we used to say, okay, XYZ, I don't want to name some other companies, I would like to join them. Now it's not like that. You talk to some of the engineering grads, they'll say, I'm just looking for a small company near HSR, or I'm talking about Bangalore, so maybe some other, this one. They always want to see whether so-called my work is related to the bigger purpose. And this is where HR plays a bigger role. Holistic well-being. They are looking for well-being. Let's not discount that factor. And the most important, the growth in terms of not the rewards. It's a total rewards, the health and well-being, the so-called growth in terms of the education factor, growth in terms of whether I can move to the next level or not just having the titles alone. Is it like, can I move in terms of my career paths? All those kind of things is something which gets discussed in the so-called so-called boundary of EVP. Now, why EVP? I don't have to tell you this. Increase in net promoters. Because if you have a strong employment value proposition, that drives talent. Please understand, talent are still there. It's going to be there, and it's going to be more in the coming days. So your so-called brand building exercise around the employment value proposition helps you to increase the net promoters. And in the term of HR or in terms of marketing, we call this as net promoter. This one, net promoter score or anything for that matter, net promoter score in terms of the promoters minus detractors, and that's very important. And promoters are very important because they start speaking about your brand to others also, driving performance. As long you have this performance, that's what people look for. When you have employment value proposition rightly stated, you have performers joining your organizations. That itself kickstarts great talents in your team. It's in tune with the first point. Most important, I'm sure everyone knows about organization citizenship behavior or a discretionary effort. Discretionary effort is the most important thing as part of the human capital. That is why the third point is intent to stay. You're looking at the cost in terms of hiring plus retention is what is really important for an organization. Attraction, motivation, development, and retention. For retention, what do you do? The discretionary effort. If you have a strong brand, that itself kickstarts. As I said, one of the important aspects is the purpose. When you see my organization is really meeting my expectations, it's giving me challenges. It is giving me a lot of things to intellectually stimulate, intellectually challenge the status quo. That itself becomes in area for people to stay back. It's not everyone is looking for only the salary packs these days. The youngsters or the so-called Generation Z whom we are talking about, they're looking for something really creative, which really gives them the kind of kick. That is something important. Total wellness. Please understand, earlier days, it was just a physical health. You just need to have a gym. Now it's beyond that. In terms of the work environment, and the work relationship, is it giving me the total wellness? Please understand, wellness is a new thing, which we'll discuss further in upcoming slides. And that also goes up. And that is part of your so-called human capital. And very important is, if you really maximize on the fourth point, automatically other things goes up in terms of your engagement score, in terms of your satisfaction score, whatnot. And people should really maximize that. I don't have to tell you, if you help in increasing the so-called engagement score, your commitment score also goes up. Engagement is with the work, commitment and loyalty is with your organization. And of course, yes, the whole three W's, the work environment, and the work culture. These three W also shapes the whole thing. The past view. If you happen to, let's see the past view of employer value proposition, maybe till the COVID. I would definitely put in this one saying till COVID, because we are also following this model actually earlier. Most important thing, if you look at the whole thing, was around the people, where we have the challenging this one aspects. People who join, they become our brand ambassadors. The work, basically the work, is it really just the work which they do? Third, in terms of the opportunity which we give them, in terms of the growth aspects. Next is the rewards, the paychecks, the variable pays, the benefits, the allowances. Last but not the least, the organization as itself, the brands, the Unilevers, the P&Gs, the Microsofts of the world. This was something which was considered as part of the employment value proposition attributes from the past view, which purely was defined around the employees, which were in terms of looking for the experience, and also most important, the features which would drive the employee needs. But these 5 pillars have taken a new shape, or it has taken new this one, because of the evolution. Millennials started coming in. You have digital transformation which has shaped the whole thought process. With the event of the chat GPTs, AI, MLs, deep learnings, things have gone up. Most important, also you would have seen DEIB. I would request everyone to look at the triggers. Millennials, the so-called, which I was just talking about, the 60-70% of your workforce is going to be Generation Z, millennials. They are looking for everything around the digitalization kind of thing. Third, most important, the event of the coming of DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness. I would request everyone to look at that part. Last but not the least, the most important, everyone is looking forward for something called the wellness. I need mental, physical, emotional, financial, all kind of wellness. It's not only restricted to just having a gym on cafeteria where they serve only salads and all those things. It's beyond that. Whether the so-called psychological safety is there, whether the manager is giving me space to really think, really act and do. There is a lot of freedom. There is the so-called work is really challenging, and the environment is very conducive. The culture is something which brings in excitement. This shift is something which has revolutionized and which is really taking a shape to really move towards the next level of EVP refinement. And what happens there? I'll stop there, and then I want everyone to just think about this particular slide. Employees are no more workers, which I'm sure everyone knows. Every organizations, if you look at, are now the people. They look everyone not are as an employee workers there. They look the people as a family member, the community member, and they also look into their interests and hobbies. This particular slide, I would request all of you to just dwell more in terms of getting the data. Earlier data was around the job he or she does, or probably you'll also check whether it's purely to do with your marriage or maybe age and all those things. But nowadays it's beyond that. What are the interests? What exactly excites him or her, so that I can also bring in the best interest. Believe me, my leaders, if someone has to be part of your whole purpose, it's very important you to connect two more dots. One is your passion / interest plus your so-called perseverance, which is your hard work. When you look at the 3 P's, the purpose, the passion, and the perseverance, things get aligned. And that's when people also feel, okay, this is my more than organization. I feel I'm part of this community, which has got higher level of interest. This organization also helps me to grow as a person. And that is very important in the whole scheme of things. When we have to re-engineer or recraft the word called employment value proposition, it is no more workers. It's a people or your family member who contributes to the overall purpose or overall success of your organization. Now, I would request everyone, at least everyone has got time, but I would request everyone, at least when you're going back today, just think about how is the whole thing looking right now? Do we really, earlier we used to have work and life separated. I'm sure after COVID, it has taken a huge, during the COVID, there's also, if you happen to see, work started intruding into your personal life. Now it's everything inside the whole reel of or scheme of things. Now, the most important thing is your work is there, your hobbies is there, your family, friends, everything constitutes the so-called work. And we cannot have a clear distinction also. And this is where, my dear leaders, this employment value proposition, when you're creating it, you really need good sign-off or collaboration or cohesiveness of your managers. Let's assume I'm working on an employment value proposition project. I really need to understand. I need to take the manager's inputs here, because at the end, more than anything, I'm sure everyone would agree, more than spending a lot of time at your family or at your home, you're spending more time at your office, because that is getting introduced into your life also. So it becomes very, very important to fine-tune the work. The work cannot be monotonous anymore. Work should give challenges. Work should be integrated with the interest. It should give me that kind of positivity. And that is where earlier days, it was separate. Now you cannot. So when it is getting integrated, lot of thoughts around what are the challenges? How can I really ensure the work environment, and the culture can be fine-tuned so that the brand really starts speaking for itself. And believe me, my dear leaders, if you happen to see the first slide, I was saying it's all about the perceived value. The perceived value is all with us. And that requires a lot of exchange of ideas, a lot of focus group discussions, a lot of interactions to understand what exactly is this work about. Earlier, work was restricted to a piece of paper called your job description. It's beyond that. What exactly are the level of accountabilities, responsibilities which is there? And in this piece, I would request everyone to take a note of a very important word called expectations. Expectations. When someone is joining an organization, it becomes even more and more, especially I'm talking about the Generation Z and millennials. For them, everything is instant. So in terms of instant feedback, and the expectations has to be really crafted, narrated, and given. If it is not, they will not be integrated into their whole system or ecosystem. So let's take a lot of time and really do a lot of deliberation around how do I set the right expectations in terms of the work, interest, hobbies, family, and everything. It's an integration. And that integration really calls for a lot of thought process, not just looking at the work. Work is only one aspect. The work environment and the work culture. So it's an integration of 3 W's. Now, earlier days, if you happen to see the first slide, which talking about the employer value proposition, which you saw, it was all around the employees, the experience, and the feature or the benefits people used to get. Now, because the whole shift which happened after COVID, you look at who does the work, where does it fit, and why employees work for us takes a new set of lenses. First, it was workers, as I said. Now it's people. These people work for you. They are part of the whole environment, or they are part of your so-called community, or they are part of your so-called family. And that's a view everyone should have. No more it's called workers. If you look at even I've heard some of the managers saying that, Arvind, let's not have human resources. They are no more resources. They are people. And that's why you look at some of the great organizations have really changed the word. They have maybe not just because they don't believe in that, they have moved that. The title called HR. They say people culture, people operations, and all those things. So that is because at the end you're talking to the most important resource called people. Now, where work fits, initially it was work and your so-called life. Now it's integration, and that's why it is called work-life integration project. And if you happen to do a lot of research, you will also find some of the articles from HBR, Harvard Business Review, on work-life integration. But it by itself is a project. And I would request some of the HRs who, if someone is interested, you can always reach out to me on that. The third important point, as I said, it is no more features. It's about the feelings. It's about the expectations. It's about the experiences. Feelings, expectations, and experience. Please believe me, it's an experience economy we are living in. And please understand, everyone is looking forward for feedback, experiences, and expectations. And I would request all my leaders to re-engineer your so-called job description, or you call it as job profile or role profile, whatever it is, to really work on that. Your so-called expectations, feedback, feelings, experiences. Because at the end, it's more to do with the accountability. If someone is owning a lot of things, he or she would deliver more. So this is a shift in terms of who does the work. It's a people. Where, more or less, it's an integration. And it's a project by itself. I would request all my leaders, at least when you think today, you cannot set boundaries now saying that this is work, this is my life. It gets into it because work has got into our so-called life. Third, that's because of the so-called change also, the transformation, the way, the speed at which agility is happening. The chat GPT has changed the whole life. And last but not the least, please look into something called the feelings, experiences, expectations. So when you have to do this, we call it as reinventing the EVP, or the employment value proposition. Earlier, it was perceived something like the value, but now it's an emotional response or set of attributes that people perceive, value they gain from the life, from the employment in the organization. Earlier, it was like, I work, I get this. Now, as I said, work-life integration is happening. You are part of the organization, or you're a member of the organization. That means it's a life which gets into the whole this one. And it has got something called feelings. It has got something called experience. It has got something called emotional, this one also. Emotional well-being and other aspects. And this is where the human deal framework or the employment value proposition is taking a new shape. Earlier it was EVP. Now I think we are using also something on the similar ground called the human deal framework. Now what exactly is this? I feel understood. I feel autonomous. I feel valued. I feel cared for. I feel invested. I feel understood. I feel autonomous. I feel valued. I feel cared for. I feel invested. Believe me or not, the leaders whom I am speaking to, I'm sure you all would agree to this. This is a new lens which we would look at in terms of the employment value proposition. How does the whole thing look like? Deeper connection, radical flexibility, personal growth, holistic well-being, shared purpose, deeper connections, understanding the relationship between your manager. And I think everyone in this session would also understand, or would now recollect the word called psychological safety. Am I having that connection? When, as I said, on a very serious note, from a lighter to a very serious note, if you look at considering the traffic or anything for that matter, you spend a lot of time in an organization or the work area. Let it be even if you're calling it a hybrid or anything, you're spending a lot of time, more than spending a lot of time at your home, you're spending it with your so-called boss. The work, which becomes the interaction with your boss, the work environment, and the culture. So it's very important to have the deeper connections. If the deeper connection is not there, you are not setting the right tone for the employment relationship. Radical flexibility in not in terms of giving him a lot of freedom, but you say that you speak, you can challenge. I am giving you room for speaking anything. If you feel this has to be improved, let me know. The whole environment is quite conducive for someone to speak out, vent out. That's when you make it autonomy kind of this one. Most people, if you look at the surveys from the top-notch Gallups of the world, it's about personal growth. At the end, my dear leaders, why should someone work for you? The answer is this: your own team members. I would request all my leaders. Some of you would have team members. Some of you would not. But if you look at you yourself in your life, you would have seen some people work for managers not just because he or she is deciding my salary. Especially with Generation Z and millennials, let's make it very clear: they join because they see there's a growth in terms of not just their movement of title. They feel if I am with X, he's giving me a lot of learning, he's giving me a lot of unlearning, he's giving me room for a lot of relearning. And believe me, this is something which has really stood up in terms of numbers also in organizations. At least you take up recent surveys in terms of engagements, personal growth and development, learning and development. All those kind of words is something which is really taking the this one. Holistic well-being, which is not, if you give someone a flexibility or room where there is psychological safety, automatically you're taking care of something called mental well-being. My dear leaders, let's not underestimate the power of holistic well-being. Everyone is fighting his or her battle in life, so it becomes very important. Let's not say that whole well-being is all about giving them a lot of gym memberships, or in terms of insurance you give them some cult fit kind of some coupons and all those things. It's beyond that. Whether the person or the leader, and this is where, let me make it very clear, the whole shift is where the so-called leaders now play the role of coaches, performance coaches. Earlier trend was only performance management system. Now it's called performance coaching. I would request all my leaders to understand, tomorrow you as a leader, you would have to invest a lot of things around performance coaching. I cannot just say that, okay, someone is not working, let me just move him from class A or team A to team B and all those things. Can I? It's the same thing where you can just try to do some kind of magic around someone's career. He or she would be really thankful. All fingers are different, so you got to apply different kind of mechanisms to treat everyone with different kind of this one. Customization in terms of the health and well-being is the most important norm in the current situation. Shared purpose, very important. The people, when they join in your organization day one, please try to make sure your expectations are set right in terms of making them see the bigger picture. Not just they are there because they will get a salary at the end of the year, not just because they have been asked to do something which is in a document called job description. Show, and this is where HR, as an HR or as a manager, you would also say that why you're doing this work. What exactly are we driving towards? You need not, sometimes it's not necessary you need to tell the vision and all those things, but tell them exactly what happens. Because sometimes when the people understand the bigger or the deeper things, they start putting something called time, effort, and energy. And this is what we learned in the initial, this one called discretionary effort. Organization citizenship behavior. They don't look at the clock. Then they start getting excited. And that's why some of the leaders or managers really create that magic. They say that this is the whole work. I'm giving you a lot of freedom, do a lot of stuff, and show me. And this, if you look at autonomy and the so-called investment, goes hand in hand. And this is where you have to really create a magic as well. As I said, initially it was people. Now it's deeper connections. That in terms of the relationships, what you said, in terms of the employer, this one. Initially it was just work. Now it's the flexibility in terms of how you do it. Finally, the whole kind of environment where you have got autonomy to do it. Flexibility in terms of the work, flexibility in terms of thought, everything comes there. opportunities, growth, not restricted only to just work alone, collaboration. That's why I would request some of the organizations or some of the leaders who are there in this session. You would have also seen some of the organizations these days have started something called the shadowing kind of things, where you'll also see the new budding graduates who are joining. They'll also put them under some kind of shadowing projects. So the immediate day one, they feel, okay, I'm part of the bigger things. I can see a bigger this one. I can connect the forest to the trees. That really gives them that kind of kick. And please understand, I would request all my leaders to really look into the third piece, which is the personal growth. Why should I work here? Because it really helps me empowering my knowledge. It will take me from X to 10X kind of this one. And that is something which been looked at. Total rewards framework is not anymore restricted to your so-called salaries. It's the holistic, mental, physical, emotional, and financial kind of well-being. Organization, as I said, it's more about the bigger purpose, the shared purpose of seeing big things in life. If you start making them see the big things, automatically things fall in place. Most of the organizations, they fall as basically, okay, you're here, you just need to work on this particular piece of code, or you really need to work on this. And at the end, you look at something called effectiveness and efficiency and productivity. And then you decide, okay, this person has fallen down. No, have you really been able to show them the bigger picture and the scheme of things? That's where you really make a difference. How do you do it? Most important, employees have likely to recommend your organizations. When you start having a lot of deeper connections, what happens is this is actually the same thing which I really wanted. What happens when you have deeper connections? They start saying that work for this particular manager. I would definitely like to recommend this organization because I feel they consider me as part of the family, not different. Radical flexibility in terms of lot of this one where the high performers have been taken into account. You really create an environment where high potentials are also being part of the whole thing. Personal growth indirectly leads to something called intent to stay. I feel that the OCB, the organization citizenship behavior or the discretionary effort, is being taken into account. Holistic well-being, as I said, physical, financial, mental, and all kind of this one wellness is taken care. And last but not the least, when you see a bigger purpose, that's how the people feel that, okay, I'm excited to take up this offer. Please understand, this 5 aspects is something which I would request all my leaders to at least take time out and then think and then arrive at. This is not one-time exercise. This is something which has to be done year on year, not changing your employment value propositions, but try to monitor currently what is the status and has there been any increase. We'll definitely see how it works. But next is something which I would request all my leaders to see. Deeper connections in terms of the work environment, diversity, leadership quality, family support, co-worker quality. Please understand, day one when someone joins an organization, I'm sure some of the organizations have a practice of something called the buddy system. Buddy is not being done because X company is doing it. Let me also do it. You feel someone needs to be hand-holded, and that first day experience is very important. My dear leaders, kindly take a note of this. Deeper connections is done in the day one. If you miss on that particular day one experience, you're going to miss out on many things. Managers, after HR meets, manager at least have to take time out. Let him take him or her outside or maybe within the organization. Explain to him a lot of nuances which may or not be there inside your so-called performance management system or your so-called job description. And this is very important. The first day experience sets the tone of deeper connections. When I say about deeper connections, this is where the so-called work environment and culture gets embedded. And this is what he's going to write. I'm sure everyone would have noted. Some people say immediately after your onboarding, go and type, maybe after the first day experience, I would request you to put something in the LinkedIn. Some people don't do it. And the question to all my leaders is, why are they not being prompted to do it? The whole thing is basically they have not felt that they are being part of the family. Deeper connections. Radical flexibility is in terms of the autonomy which I have, the freedom, the psychological empowerment which I have in terms of doing innovative things, taking a lot of risk. My dear leaders, this generation or the millennials need a space. They are risk takers. They need a lot of excitement in their work. They need a lot of excitement in the work environment. It's not about having a lot of different color sofas. It's beyond that. You need to understand workspace is just a piece, but then they want environment which is really secure, really safe, and really flexible, and which really allows their creative juices to come out. And if you're giving it, they're quite happy. Personal growth, professional development, personal development, career, equal opportunities, job interest alignment, career path, all those kind of things. My dear leaders, please invest here. Every company need not have your EDX or Udemy's of the world, but you can always have career coaches. You can always have career counselors. You can have mentors. You can have sponsors. Nothing is stopping us. And as long if I see my manager is in my coach, or manager has given me an opportunity to go and learn something outside, cross collaboration teams, please take a note of these things, because every organizations we do all these kind of mix and matches of things. And you cannot say that I will only do this interventions. Please understand, when you're working on an employment value proposition or anything of that kind, it's very important to do a lot of permutation and combinations around the interventions, especially in the area of personal growth. Mentoring, sponsoring, coaching, shadowing, which I have not put it here, is something which I would request all my leaders to think about it. There is something called career counseling, career coaches, all those kind of things. Please do it, because once I see my organization is investing in my so-called career, I'm bound to work. I'll always be thankful to the organizations. And that's when you have seen some people, when they leave, they always say, I'm really thankful, not because they have been asked to put something. They put because the so-called mentors, the so-called managers have played a lot of role in terms of their performance. And that's what they've been thankful for. Holistic well-being is not compensation alone. It's the health benefits, other set of vacation holiday, the well-being in terms of counseling, in terms of having a lot of openness, wherein you have doctor this one facilities and other things. Some other organizations can do it, but then still I always feel a growing organizations have plethora of options here. It is not restricted. The options are many, but the younger generation or the upcoming workforce is looking towards the holistic well-being. They don't want everything to be work. They also want space. They also want personal freedom. They're looking for something around the KFC, kindness. Not KFC. I would request to change the F into E. Kindness, empathy, and compassion. Compassion has started coming into our organizations. My dear leaders, as an HR, please ensure you drive this kind of sessions: kindness, empathy, and compassion. This cannot be taught like a session, but then I would request the coaching managers or the so-called compassionate leaders of future will have to have kindness, empathy, and compassion driven into the organization. That also drives the employment value proposition. Last but not the least, please understand this world or this so-called workforce, the 70% which I was talking about, they're looking for something called CSR, the so-called environment kind of this one. Is my organization really looking into that so-called environment kind of this one? Are they really looking into ethics? If you look at most of the organizations, almost every organization is there in Glassdoor, and the generation always looks, they start talking to their own friends. Do you really see the so-called culture is good? Do you see they are also contributing to the so-called environment? They are asking, and it becomes very important. As an HR, we really need to drive or inject these factors when you're developing the employment value proposition composition in your organization. Quite interesting slide, very easy, which all my leaders would be knowing. It should be appealing, because that is something which gives you a competitive advantage or edge. Authentic. My dear leaders, you need not copy it from the world's best companies or whatever it is, greatest companies or whatever you call it, or the great place to work companies. You as an organization, accountability holders, whom I'm talking, the HR leaders in this session, you would know your organization better. definitely the next slide is talking about that, but then I would request all my leaders to understand, be authentic. Whatever is not there, please don't commit it, because this whole social media might backfire. So kindly keep a note of it. Relevant and authentic. I always see authenticity and relevance in this one. Relevance, which is part of the organization, which is there, which really, let's assume innovation. If you feel my organization is all about innovation, you can definitely have it. But if it's not about, let's assume, I always feel Amazon never says it's innovative organization. But you look at an Apple, it always says it's innovative. And definitely you can understand. And when you say about the relevance, why I'm putting so much stress on that is because that is the capability, that is the DNA of an organization. And I would request all my leaders, at least if time permits, there is something called capability audit, HBR article from Dave Ulrich, which says, please identify your capabilities, know your capabilities of your organization. And Amazon is known as a customer-centric company in this earth. Apple would be innovation. Likewise, every company has got its own DNA. And if your EVP is not aligned to that particular organization strategy or organization's capability, it can backfire. People will not have that much, they will not believe it. You lose on the authenticity part. And always most important, it should be differentiated. It has to have the difference in terms of the competitor match, also the competitive advantage in terms of the difference. What exactly is these 4 things telling me about? Why should I come here? Not the X, not the Y. That is the whole thing. I'm sure all my leaders, as part of the session, you will be knowing this. Appealing, authentic, relevance, differentiating kind of thing. Last slide, the most exciting thing. I'm sure everyone knows this. Probably we are just doing a reinforcement. Plan the design process. My dear leaders, the whole set of thing is not something which HR has to do it, not the recruitment team. It's an HR team which really believes in this employment value proposition, because we are branding the so-called entity called organization. Or if I were to say, I would say I am a brand, so I have to invest in it. So it's an investment process. So it has to be done sacrosanct, and it has to be done with full belief. Otherwise, we should not dive into this. Determine and communicate your goals of EVP design. The purpose. Why am I doing it? Not just attract. If you happen to see the third slide, which we were just talking about, we are not here to we just don't need only just saying that. I have heard some other people saying, Aravind, if we have this employer value proposition or an employment value proposition, immediately I'm going to have the talent advantage. I'm going to win the war of talent. No, it is not that. It is beyond that. Especially the generations which we are talking about, they're very intelligent. They want to see, is this EVP in tune with the culture? So that is most important. Have your so-called purpose set very nicely, because if your so-called the second point is not there, then we should not be doing it. Now, most important, data around EVP design is you start talking to, this is where you will start talking to a lot of employees, a lot of outsiders, lot of stakeholders, including the managers, the leaders, where you start understanding, this is what I'm planning to do. This is exactly is the outcome I'm looking for. And the questions what you're going to ask them is, what do you think this organization is all about? Start doing a lot of factor analysis. You will start getting a lot of exciting things which you would not even thought about. And then you start bringing the commonalities, and then you start attributing the most important thing is core EVPU from the so-called, say you would have collected 15-20 numbers after the so-called focus. This one you would have almost cutting the similarities, you would have got almost 20-30 kind of attributes. Most important thing is select those and start working on those core. If you've got 20 numbers, you got to really sit with your leadership. Tell them why exactly you're going for this set of attributes from this 20. It has to be aligned to your vision. It has to be aligned to your culture. It should be relevant to your business. The previous slide. Then you start taking the few things from there. Again, go back to the business, saying that this is why we are going for this. Finally, most important, tailor it with the talent which is looking you from the outside. Both internal and the outside view can help you in really selecting the few attributes. And this 4th and 5th is not one-time exercise. It takes a lot of iteration, because you have gathered the data, selecting core attributes and tailoring is almost 4 or 5 months exercise, because you cannot decide this is the element. Why? It has to go through at least 6 or 7 times. You have to ask why this attribute. Let's assume. And my humble request to all my leaders is, you should, because in my previous stint as well as my current stint, I have been part of this employment value proposition committee. What I have seen is, you might get 15-20, but arriving at that 4 or 5 requires a lot of logical and in the so-called heart and head rationalization. Because why should, and you should take the lens of your own employees and the outside employees, because finally it's based on rational, not just emotional alone. Tailor it again, work on refining it again in terms of what exactly happens. As I said, 4, 5, 6 is the exercise of iteration. You take feedback from their managers, again do focus group discussions, and finally what happens is you refine it, start building it, and communicating. My dear leaders, maybe it's my bad, I would have missed the 7th point. Communicate to the inside world first. Make a campaign, do a lot of road shows, let leaders speak about it, a lot of videos. It doesn't cost you much. But if our own employees don't know what is our value proposition, don't expect them to propose to the outside world. And it's something which has to be believed, which they really feel it is there in the organization. First do the internal communication and start putting your external communication also. Then you start evaluating it through the so-called mediums, which is your LinkedIn page mediums, or you go to colleges, you ask your own people, do a lot of quizzes around it, a lot of communication this one. Then you'll understand whether it is really there. And as I said, every year on year, you really need to reinforce it. It's like a nudge. It is not one-time activity. So that's it. So once again, I would request all my leaders to at least look at this. And I would request all my leaders to have at least take a lot of time around to understand whether the so-called I feel understood, I feel freedom, there is a lot of autonomy in this organization, I feel valued. I've been repeating this, I feel really valued, because this piece or this piece of cake is the most important and something which really gives the icing also. And holistic well-being, which whole world is looking forward for. And the most important, why should I? What is the end, or what is the so-called connecting dots between the forest and the trees? And that becomes the exciting part of the whole journey. Okay, with this, I'll definitely stop. And thanks for the great opportunity. It was great interacting with my leaders. Thank you once again, HROne. I'm opening now. I can open for questions. Now I'm opening for questions. Yeah. Yes, Pulkit. I'm open for questions and thoughts and feedbacks.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions for Mr. Warrior, you can place them in the comment section. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up.
Any questions, any thoughts?
Yeah. Okay, we'll wait for a couple of seconds.
Sure.
Or maybe a minute or so.
Sure.
Okay. I think we can answer any of the questions later on, right? You always have access to email as a channel, or you can post your questions in the comment box. We'll do our best to get you the answers from Mr. Warrior. But let me just conclude this masterclass. Thank you, Mr. Aravind, for sharing your knowledge with our audience. Of course, the insights you provided on HR branding and EVP were super impactful, and I'm confident that it would have resonated with everybody out there who attended today's session. We are thankful to you for your commitment to enhancing HR as a function, and we look forward to collaborating with you again in the future. Thanks once again for everything today.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. To all our audience, thanks for joining today's masterclass. Of course, your presence does make it super fantastic for us. We're grateful for your time and contribution. contributions. Please do note that we conduct these masterclasses on a monthly basis. So be sure to mark your calendar and join us again on the next masterclass, which is going to be next month. Once again, thank you for being here, and special thanks to our excellent trainer, Mr. Aravind Warrier, for today's masterclass. Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks a lot. Okay. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Good day.